Hey, it's Vironika coming to you live right now from boiling hot Mexico. It's been so hot all day, so the sun's gonna set in about an hour. So I've got this like little period of time where there's still light outside, where I can make a video and it's not too dark. I wanted to take an opportunity now to talk about something that really funny that happened to me in the past week. And I hope that it gives you some insight into your own journey, because I think we all experience this. I want to talk about intuition, and I'm not talking anything woo-woo or weird here. I'm just talking about intuition as in when you just get a feeling, and there doesn't seem to be much logic behind it. You just get a feeling like you just want to do something just feels right. And when you try to look inside of that feeling and you try to find all these logical reasons as to why you should do it, it all just kind of comes down. The feeling's more powerful than the reasons that you should apparently do this thing. So what happened was that about a week ago, I got an application to work with me from this girl, a young girl, and I'm full. At the moment I have all the clients that I can handle. I don't like to take on too many people. I get really deep with the people that I work with. I'm like their best friends. So I just find that if I take on more than like 3 or 4 people, then I tend to get people's stories mixed up, and then all the different time zones, because I do everything online. So I was totally full, not taking any new people, and I told her that. I told her about the self-love challenge, and I just said, right now I just can't. And every day since I got her application, I just kept feeling this desire to talk to her again, to go and to work with her. And I would think about her, like I would wake up in the morning and I would think about her, and I would be going to bed at night and she would just pop into my head, and it was totally bizarre. She's just walking in and out of my mind, and I just couldn't get her out of there. And so I said, okay, why? Why is this happening? And I tried to read her application again, and it wasn't that long, it wasn't that detailed. And I was like, is there something specific here that's triggered me into feeling this way? And I just couldn't find it. I just couldn't find any reason why she would be any different from anybody else. But still, I kept getting this feeling and getting this feeling. So eventually, about 2 to 3 days ago, I caved. I was like, you know what? It's really boiling hot here. We can't go out. It's so hot. This is the hottest ever. And I'm not complaining. It's better than Canada, but it's obscenely hot here. And so I can't really go on nature walks. Can't really spend too much time outside. The roads are unpaved, so there's all this dust in the air, and it's too hot anyway. So I'm like, instead of going on the nature walks, which are really important to me, maybe I could take on a new client, right? And then that makes me feel this feeling of being interconnected with the world, and it makes me feel good. So I said, okay, I'm gonna get in touch with her. And so I got in touch with her and I said, you know what, let's do it. Let's have this intro session, and obviously we need to see if we're right for each other. And yesterday we did it, and wow, I have no words. It was just the most amazing experience. And now, having been through it, and all the laughs and all the excitement, and I was so excited. I jumped up and down afterwards, and so did she, and it was just great. And then in that feeling, I was like, wow, this feeling is so much more powerful than I thought it would be, right? Because when you get that intuitive feeling, then it tells you, okay, do this thing, but you don't really feel how good you're going to feel. So that was the first thing I realized. When we get this intuitive kind of message, then it's not really giving us all the information, because it tells us do it, but it can't really, the message itself cannot contain the emotion that you're going to experience afterwards, right? That emotion is sort of a reward, trust yourself, then you get the reward of the really good emotion. So the emotion was really, really good. And afterwards, when it kind of subsided, I got all this hindsight. I'm looking back at what she said, how she said it, her age, her behavior, the kinds of things that she's going through. And I realized, wow, there are so many reasons why I felt the way that I did. got so much in common with me, so much in common with my story, parts of my story that, you know, sometimes I've told people, sometimes I haven't. But there's so many similarities there, you know, and looking back on it, having followed through with my intuitive feel, I realized that that feeling wasn't just a feeling. And I've realized this before, but it really just came to my attention yesterday that when you get an intuitive feeling that's really powerful, that doesn't mean that it's like this irrational, emotional experience that has no logic. I think what's really happening there is that there's too much logic. There are way too many reasons why you need to do this thing, you know, like there's so many thoughts, picking up patterns over my entire life, subconsciously picking up on, she said this word and this linked to where she lives and her age and the way that she talks about this and these things that I've seen her do. It all comes together in this just giant cacophony, you know, it's like a kaleidoscope. There are way too many factors there, right? And all that my brain can really do is try to process through them, and it makes a conclusion. And the conclusion comes in the form of a feeling, right? So I think there's this draw for us to look at an intuitive feeling like, oh, I should do this, I feel drawn towards this, and think, oh, well, it's just a hunch, you know, it's just coming from nowhere. But I think it's like the iceberg, you know, you see the tip of the iceberg, and that's like 10% of the actual iceberg. Everything else that's under the water, like 90% of it is under there, and you can't see it, but it's very much there. And it's just been a really good reminder for me of that. And I couldn't see it until I had kind of been through it, and then I see, okay, there's this pattern. And somehow everything just feels better now. And it wasn't like everything was wrong before I followed this hunch, but it was playing on my mind, you know, this, her popping into my head in the morning, her popping into my head at night, and that pattern of being interrupted in my day to think about this thing that I'd done, because I had essentially told her, you know, do the self-love challenge first, and then we'll see what happens in the future. I had essentially turned her away, right? And then I started becoming really hyper aware of this, of my interactions with people, right? So in that week before yesterday, before I went on my session with her, I found my mind kind of going in this strange direction where I started hyper-analyzing my interactions with people. I started saying, okay, have I really done the most compassionate thing? Have I really done the most loving thing? Have I done the right thing? And at the moment, that's all gone. And I realized that it wasn't that I was caught in this thought pattern for no reason. You know, this intuitive message that had so much logic behind it, so many reasons behind it, was at the forefront of my mind. And it's almost like I had to do it in order for it to not spill into the rest of my life and start to take over. You know, it's like when you ignore somebody, they just get more and more agitated and they start speaking louder and louder and louder. So not only is following that intuitive hunch good for that amazing reward that you get, I also realized that there's a huge punishment for it. And at the time, I mean, last week, I couldn't really even have told you why that was happening. I mean, when you're really in it, it's hard to tell. You know, I try to be as self-aware as I can, but it's hard to catch yourself. And it's easy to say, like, oh, it's just my hormones, or lately it's like, oh, it's just the weather. It's just making me feel like my brain's melting. And it wasn't. You know, it was just this feeling that I got, and I followed it, and it's just been amazing and so rewarding. So I hope that if you get anything out of this little story and out of the lessons that I've learned from it, it's that those intuitive hunches, those gut feelings that you get, they matter. They're not just some crazy, wacko, random thing that happens to you that you should just ignore because it's coming out of nowhere. Like, no, that's coming from you. You know, like if you if you have a printer and then it prints a piece of paper, okay? Like the piece of paper says whatever it says, right? You can print off a letter, for example, and then you get the piece of paper and it's got the letter on it. But if you rip open the printer and you see all the hardware and the moving gears and the bits inside of it, you can get really confused by all of that moving hardware. And in a way, you don't need to know, right? All that matters is the final product that comes out. And I think that's what intuitive messages are like. You know, there are so many logical thoughts there. There are so many analyses. There are so many subconscious processes of connecting the past to the present to the future, of your potential, of your past history, of what's felt good, what's felt bad, what are you capable of, right? Things that you couldn't possibly keep consciously aware of, but subconsciously there's an awareness of it, right? It's kind of like all the little gears in the side of the printer. The feeling is like the piece of paper that comes out, right? The feeling is like the instruction. And I think there's really something to be said for saying, okay, I'm just gonna take the piece of paper, I'm gonna take this letter from me to me, right? I'm gonna read it, and I'm gonna do what it says. And when you first start this journey, I guarantee you it'll be really hard, because the voice will be really small, really quiet, you know, it'll maybe tell you to do one little tiny thing, it really hesitates. But the more that you follow it, the more that you follow those hunches, the louder they get, right? So if you've already done this a few times, you know it gets louder. It's like it's a voice inside of you. It gets more confident, it starts speaking to you more often, and soon enough, you know, you get gut feelings about things, and then you just end up swimming in this blissful feeling of accomplishment, of having done the right thing, right? And it's just beautiful how you don't need to, you know, go to an outside authority. You don't need to go to an expert. You don't need to, don't need to go to your parents, your partner, or whatever. You don't need to ask people what you should do. Like, how do I become happy? What do I do? Where do I go, right? Like, those messages are already coming from inside of you. They're coming from inside of you. Maybe yours are quieter than your next door neighbor's. It doesn't matter, right? Yours are still coming from inside of you. And the more that you choose to follow that and trust that behind this little feeling, there's so much depth, then I think the happier you become in the long run. The more you achieve your potential, the more you get those rewards, and the more you kind of avoid the punishments that you give to yourself for that mistrust. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful for you and enlightening, and I hope that you go off and you trust yourself with everything that you've got, because honestly, you deserve it and it's important. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.